The Samsung Galaxy Chromebook was a premium Chromebook released in 2020 that was lauded for its design and specs, but ended up having major flaws of low battery life and a big price tag. The follow-up Galaxy Chromebook II was recently released this year, and Samsung has addressed many of the complaints of the first version, but lowering the cost means some sacrifices had to be made. Now that the first Galaxy Chromebook is a year old, it's not hard to find at a price that approaches the newer Galaxy Chromebook II. You might be wondering which one you should get. Well, I have both of them here, so let's compare. The Chromebook 2 has two models available, but this one will be a comparison of the higher spec model. If you want to stand out, there's also a red variant for each. To save some words and time from now on in the video, I'll call the first Galaxy Chromebook the GC1 and the Galaxy Chromebook 2 the GC2. On paper, the GC2 is a spec downgrade. However, the important thing to note is that the GC2 has a fan, while the GC1 is passively cooled. After a stress test, the GC1 got really hot on the underside and very warm near the top of the keyboard. The GC2, on the other hand, only got slightly warm on the bottom and top, but you will hear a slight hum from the quiet fan. The difference in the processors and eMMC versus SSD isn't enough to notice in regular use, but I do think it may help for the future as Chrome OS begins to get a little more bloated with new features. The design of both laptops are very similar. From the top, you probably can't tell as they look identical. The difference comes from the thinness of the two devices. Side by side, the GC1 looks much thinner than the already thin GC2. The GC1 is definitely all metal. The GC2 has a metal top and a metal bottom, but the keyboard area is definitely plastic. It's nice feeling plastic though. The ports are pretty much identical except for the fact that the microSD card reader is on different sides, and the GC1 can take a much faster UFS type card. But for now, that type of card is proprietary to some Samsung devices, so it might not be helpful for most people. Here's the one-hand opening test. Interestingly, the thinner and lighter GC1 is the one that worked. The GC2's hinge seems to be causing this, as it has more resistance than the GC1. Since the screens are so thin, there is some wobble. They seem to be about the same when using the touchscreen, but the GC1 has a bit more wobble when using on your lap due to the looser hinge. The keyboard on the GC1 is the same gray color as the unit, but the GC2 has changed to a black color. They have a similar travel and they're both a quiet typing experience, but the GC2's keys feel just a little bit more like cheap plastic. The black keys are much easier to see than the gray with the white lettering though. The trackpads are different. The GC1's trackpad is wider and it has a much smoother feel. It feels slightly thicker and the click feels much better. The GC2's trackpad is decent, but using them both there is a noticeable difference. Also, the actual mouse cursor tracking feels less smooth on the GC2, but I only noticed it after using the GC1 trackpad. The speakers are located on the side for the GC1 and the bottom sides for the GC2. Both speakers aren't great, but the GC2 speakers can get much louder and sounds a bit better than the GC1. The GC1 does have a couple of extra features that are removed from the GC2. The GC1 has a world camera and a fingerprint reader. The fingerprint reader works great, but for now all it seems to do is log you in when the laptop wakes from sleep. On boot, it still requires a type password, and most websites don't support logging in with the fingerprint reader. About tablet mode though, the GC2 currently has a bug with rotation that won't let you turn in some orientations. This also causes tent mode not to work. The 4K OLED screen of the GC1 was what everyone talked about when it was first released. It's the first 4K OLED screen on a Chromebook and it does look amazing. The GC2 also has a first for a screen though. It's the first QLED screen for a Chromebook. The technology is used in some of Samsung's higher end TVs, but now they're adapting it to their laptops. Still, on paper, it looks like the GC1's OLED screen will be the better one here, but side by side, it's actually not as good as the GC2's Full HD QLED screen. The OLED screen has a much warmer temperature than the QLED. This is with the GC1's ambient color setting off because I think that setting is actually broken right now. It's too sensitive and constantly changing the color temperature. It's been over a year now, so I don't think that's ever going to get fixed. The problem with the warmer temperature is that it just seems a lot less accurate for white backgrounds and skin tones. It's something that you'll notice on web pages and when you're watching videos. It's not as noticeable on its own, but seeing them next to each other makes a difference. The brightness is also not as high on the OLED screen compared to the QLED. Really, the only advantage to the OLED screen I can see is the deep blacks that it can achieve, and you have a bit more options in scaling since it's 4K. Maybe you want to have tiny letters and fit more windows? Well, you can do that with the 4K screen. The OLED screen also has this weird effect that might bother some people where the taskbar dims when it's not in use. I have a feeling it's a power saving measure, or it could prevent burn-in, but it doesn't occur on the QLED screen. The biggest difference between these two Chromebooks has to be battery life. The GC2 wins here, and with normal use I was able to get about 11 hours of usage. The GC1 required me to be mindful of the screen brightness and other possible battery draining activities, and even then I only got about 6 hours of battery life. I'm not exactly a power user though, and my normal usage of a Chromebook is a couple of tabs open. Some web browsing and mostly word processing with maybe a little bit of programming. Even with that little workload, the battery difference is huge between the two laptops. In the end, I decided to keep the GC1 model. The differentiating factor for me was a slightly better build quality and the fingerprint reader. I still think the QLED screen is better, but the OLED screen is still very good for my usage purposes. Battery life is adequate for me too, as I'm usually able to charge where I use the Chromebook. I hope you guys found this video useful. Until next time.